Welcome back for part 2 of Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. Got some pre-rendered cutscenes for obvious reasons. I guess a lot of it has to do with loading, like they can only load the bridge and the characters in the cutscene, and they don't have enough, back then in the 2000s people would have to rely on cutscenes to try and help with the lack of RAM that people used to have. But they did a really good job regardless, and I particularly like the pre-rendered cutscenes. It's almost at the quality of the TV show. 7 of 9, one of the most interesting characters. So Janeway, she used to be kind of annoy me when I was a kid, probably because she reminded me too much of my teacher. But as an adult, I really appreciate her character. There's a lot of depth to her, and one of the most underrated captains when it comes to all of Star Trek. In fact, she might very well be my third favorite captain out there, just below Picard and Kirk. Lots of button pushing. So I know I'm talking a lot about the TV show while I talk about this game, but as you can see, Voyager disappears into another part of space. But one of the things I never liked about the Next Generation Star Trek versus the original, original series, particularly with the original movies with Kirk and Spock and McCoy. So in the Next Generation, this new style of science fiction was introduced, and there's just a lot of button pushing. No, really, pay attention to any episode of any Next Generation Star Trek, whether it be Deep Space Nine or Voyager or, Star Trek The Next Generation, and you'll notice that there's a lot of beep 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 beep, people just pushing buttons, and it's just not very engaging, not very exciting. Compare that to the original series, and the original movies, and also compare it to the new movies, the 2009 onward motion pictures. You notice that it's less button pushing, and it's more like running and shouting and more action centered stuff. So I do find these not new, but I do find the 90s Star Trek to be kind of boring in that sense. That being said, I kind of understand why they did that, because they needed to cut back on costs, so they couldn't have a lot of external action sequences with spaceships and stuff like that due to budget restraints. Now, computer graphics did help alleviate this budget limit, but it was particularly hard with using models. And as far as I know, the USS Voyager is probably the last hero ship to actually be a model. In Star Trek Enterprise, they used a computer-generated ship. So they didn't build a model for the Enterprise in the 2001 series. But as you can see, they ripped this straight from the intro of Star Trek Voyager. Obviously put in the game designers' names instead of the TV shows, producers and actors. But the theme song is different, and it actually is kind of catchy. Yeah, they're using synthesized orchestra, not a real orchestra, but again, Raven, limited budget, they can only do as much as the resources were given to them. And Raven really knows how to do a lot with little, just like with id Software. Except Raven, unlike id Software, isn't afraid of increasing the size of their team that work on these games. You see, id Software, particularly John Carmack, he felt that they should keep the team small, just like maybe a dozen people, no more than that. And this is one of the reasons why games like Doom 3 and Rage took so long to get a release, because they spent such a long time to build these games due to a small team that they had. Now, Raven was far more efficient. They would hire as many people as they needed that the budget would allow. And this was really good because Raven had released quite a lot of games during the 1990s, and thanks to id Software producing these really good, efficient and powerful game engines, they were able to not have to build their own engines, and so that would save Raven even more time at the expense of id Software's time. So I really like that in Elite Force that you can run around the ships and Later on in the game, you do go and visit other starships in this sort of starship graveyard that Voyager now found herself in. But it can be kind of maze-like. As you can see, I'm trying to figure out where the heck I'm supposed to go. For the most part, it is linear, but sometimes you do have like distracting corridors that lead to nowhere. Now just watch the scene. Okay, as you can see, I pressed the button a little too soon, and he ended up on the other side of the force field and was killed in the explosion. That kind of annoys me because he told me like seconds before I was actually supposed to press the button. He says, quickly, press the button. So I was like, oh, okay. Then I press the button and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm doing what you told me to do. So I don't care about him. He can die if he wants. Also averted another disaster. You probably didn't notice anything. I really hate this mission information updater thing flashing in front of me. Like, you always have to remember to press tab. It just won't go away. Like, I prefer it like in games like Amnesia. Are you guys familiar with Amnesia, The Dark Descent? Well, that game did it right. You have like a little icon that appears at the bottom right of the screen, rather than having this text flashing in the middle like it is again. So annoying. Anyways, so let's take a look at the list of things that I already talked about. Let's see, music. It's so much like the TV show theme. All right, so I said at the beginning of this playthrough that I like this game more than Elite Force 2. And yes, Elite Force 2, although it doesn't take place on Voyager, because spoiler alert, Voyager does get back to Earth in less than 70 years. I think it was 7 years that it took for Voyager to get back home, thanks to wormholes and stuff like that. So the Elite Force, or more specifically, they're actually called the Hazard Team, does get transferred onto the USS Enterprise E. Yeah, Picard's ship. And that's probably why one of the reasons why a lot of people really like Elite Force 2, because it's on the Enterprise, you know? But the game, the gunplay just isn't quite as good as Elite Force 1. And that's probably because Elite Force 1 is basically a reskin of Quake 3, and anything that is a reskin of Quake 3 just makes that automatically a good game, because Quake 3 just has brilliant gunplay, brilliant controls, and of course the graphics are good and stuff like that, because of the very sophisticated engine. But yeah, so I really do feel that this is the better game of the two. I'm still trying to finish Elite Force 2, but I did get stuck in that game quite badly because the map design isn't as intuitive as Elite Force 1.
There are two things you have to do, so listen carefully.
Now this sequence of this game I find to be quite interesting, because you realize that, okay, it's not just about shooting, it's also about doing Star Trek-y stuff, you know? You have to contain the warp core from exploding, or well, for those that don't know, the warp core has a chamber that has antimatter inside of it, and if you do not contain that antimatter, and that matter mixes with our matter, with real matter, it will create a massive explosion. And this is what you have to do. You have to contain the antimatter, but because there's a lot of radiation in this room, no one can help you. They can only tell you what to do. So she's telling you what you must do, where you must go. Obviously, everything's not working out. The elevator isn't working, so you have to, you know, it just keeps you on edge. You have to really hurry it up. And I like sequences like this. It's not just a skin, a Star Trek skin of Quake 3. It also has some Star Trek elements, which probably contradicts the last thing I said about the gunplay, but you get what I'm saying. I'm glad that he remembers the code, because I'm just too too nervous to do anything properly here.
Access granted. Power relays have been cut.
I really enjoy the recreations of this starship in this game. I really enjoy just walking around in a 3D spaceship. I really like immersive games like that.
Core breach averted.
So this game was released originally on Windows, and it got a Mac OS port. Eventually, it would also get a Linux port, but unfortunately, only the multiplayer worked on Linux, and a few other really obscure operating systems, like, let's see, Amiga OS. Like, surely they're not talking about the Commodore Amiga, are they? I'm pretty sure not. Morph OS. Again, these are all multiplayer-centered ports of the game. But this also did get a PlayStation 2 port. Anyways, just one more thing I want to say. It depends on how many views this video gets. I might or might not do an episode on Hollow Match, which is the multiplayer aspect of this game. But yeah, thank you for watching. I think you guys really should check it out if you can somehow get your hands on this game. The weapons, very enjoyable. The multiplayer, also very enjoyable. And other than that, a pretty solid reimagining of Star Trek Voyager from a first-person shooter perspective. So you guys really should check it out. And thank you for listening.